frantic screams of the man appeared to be originating from across the lake. Quickly, I turned and faced the water. On the horizon was a figure with a blood-red glow. The sun had now set, and the air was crisp. With each breath I took, a thick white mass sank towards the ground as it gradually faded from existence. This figure stood completely still for a moment before it appeared to move towards me. Then, in an instant, the figure was directly in front of me. I stood there for what seemed to be an eternity, staring into the empty void where its face used to be. It then passed through my body, and in that moment I was standing in a pitch-black room. Somewhere in the distance I could hear the sounds of a sobbing woman. I headed towards the sound, and as I approached, the woman who once stayed in room 406 called to me, "You aren't supposed to be here." Before I could embrace her, she and the room had disappeared, and visions of a small male child being beaten by a woman appeared before me. As the apparition exited out the other side, I was at the lake again. The phrase I had discovered on the wall of the institution echoed all around me, like a whisper in the wind. One day you'll discover the truth. Terrified, I ran into my apartment as quickly as I could. When I got there, I googled the woman's name to try and find out where she was. Surely she had answers. Just knew it. She had to. The only thing I could find on the woman after many hours of searching was a single post on a medical blog dated 2 years prior to my finding. Immediately I knew something was up, as the timeline that the woman had given me didn't line up with the date attached to this post. Adding to the confusion, the woman spoke as she was not just a lowly nurse, as she once stated. The blog post titled, "Schizophrenic Anomalies," stated the following. "I have a patient whose name will be kept anonymous, showing all the telltale signs of schizophrenia disorder. Social isolation, aggressive behavior, repetitive movements, amnesia, and intense fear, just to name a few. We have diagnosed and treated the patient accordingly. 1 year after his initial diagnosis, he developed a new symptom, delusions. The patient would scream out words and phrases that were seemingly of no significance. Since this discovery, however, 4 of my colleagues came to me reporting strange events connected to the patient's words. Each report had a common theme, tragic loss of life. After I had finished reading, I could barely keep my eyes open. It had been 24 hours since I last slept, and how could I? Nevertheless, I decided it best to try and get some rest. When I got to work the next night, I looked up the woman's information in our hotel's guest log. At this point, I was starting to wonder if the information there was even valid. I was questioning everything I knew about her. The only truth I knew was that the apparition, or whatever it was after me now, and I had to find out why. In the log, I discovered that she had a single emergency contact listed. This person shared the same last name, so I assumed it was either a brother or a husband. I called the number on file, and an older man, presumably the same age as the woman, answered the phone. I stated who I was, and asked if she had seen the woman since her departure from the hotel. I informed him that she had left some personal belongings behind. This was a lie, of course. I didn't want it to seem strange that I was just calling him for information on her whereabouts. He claimed that she was out of town on business and wouldn't be back for an undetermined amount of time. I then asked if he would like the items mailed to her. He agreed and gave me an address that I could send them to. I wrote down what he had told me and ended the phone call. Immediately after, I did a quick search on the address I was given. I found that this address was very close enough to drive to after I got off work the next morning. For the entirety of my shift, my mind was filled with angst. I struggled to pass the time, and all I could think about was getting off work and finding answers. When 3:25 a.m. came around, I started to think of the stories the woman used to tell me. I couldn't help but feel anger towards her for the lies she had told me. Then I heard the emergency exit door alarm go off. This was a usual occurrence. During the day, we would keep the doors unlocked and disarmed due to the non-smoking policy we had in place. It was more convenient for the guests to use these exits to go out and smoke, as the only other alternative would have been to exit the main lobby doors. At night, I would go around locking these doors for guest safety, enabling the alarm in the process. Occasionally, guests would step out, oblivious to the fact that these doors were locked from the outside and armed. Assuming it was just another guest going out for a smoke, I walked over to the door. When I rounded the corner, I found the door was wide open and a cool draft was blowing through the empty hallway. As I approached the door, it slammed shut, nearly catching my hand in the process. I jumped back, and as I did, I felt someone behind me. Hastily, I turned around and saw a glimpse of the same apparition that I encountered before. The hallway lights flickered off, and I was then standing in pitch black. A frenzied voice screaming the phrase, "You cannot have her," lingered in the newly formed abyss. In a second, the power was restored and everything appeared to be normal again. I somehow mustered enough courage to walk back to the front desk, where I sat and waited out the night. After work, I drove to the address that was given to me. Now, I was more determined than ever to find answers. I was sick and tired of being haunted by this psychotic poltergeist. I was done with living in fear. My GPS took me to an old, beat-down farmhouse that sat on several acres of land. The house appeared to be unoccupied and uninhabited for many years. I parked my car and approached the house. I yelled, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Then I waited a few moments before determining that the house was indeed empty. The door was unlocked, so I decided I would have a look around. Inside, all the furniture was covered in white fabric with mounds of dust accumulated on it. On the ceilings were hundreds of cobwebs, swaying ever so slightly from the draft of my movement. As I made my way around the interior of the house, I stumbled upon an old wooden door leading to the basement. When I opened the door, a draft of stale, dust-filled air circled around me. I pulled the chains of the light, and it was of no use. The house hadn't had power for quite some time. Using the light from my phone, I descended the stairs. I was suddenly standing on a tiled floor with all sorts of medical equipment that from my guess dated back at least 50 years. After a brief search of the room, I came across a framed picture covered in dust. I wiped the glass with the bottom of my shirt and saw an old photo of 5 people, all dressed in medical scrubs. Among these people was none other than the woman, and underneath her picture it read, "Amelia Frost, M.D." I thought to myself, who were these other people? What was this lab used for? Where is the woman now? Why did she lie about being a nurse? With more questions than answers, I left the house, taking the picture with me.